Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. I woke slowly, the warmth of the morning sun spilling across the room and catching on the thin sheet that barely clung to me. My muscles stretched instinctively, and I felt the subtle thrill of being caught in a private moment. That's when I heard the soft creak of the door. My heart leapt. He was there. He paused just inside the doorway, his eyes scanning me with a mixture of surprise and something I couldn't quite name. The sheet slipped slightly as I shifted, and I froze, aware of his gaze tracing the line of my shoulders. My pulse hammered in my ears, quick and uneven, and the room seemed smaller somehow, charged with the quiet tension between us. Instead of stepping back, he walked closer, his steps careful, deliberate, almost like he knew exactly the effect he had. A playful smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth as he bent just enough to whisper my name, the sound soft yet insistent. Goosebumps rose along my skin at the closeness of his voice, his presence pressing into the space between us. I caught his hand brushing mine, an almost accidental touch that sent a shiver racing down my spine. The silence stretched, heavy and full, as if the world outside the room had vanished. Every detail felt magnified, the way his gaze lingered, the slight hitch in his breath, the warmth of him so near I could feel it on my own skin. There was mischief in his eyes, a teasing boldness that made it impossible to look away. I wanted to speak, to break the tension, but the words stuck in my throat. My chest rose and fell faster, and my mind was a tangle of anticipation and curiosity. What would happen next? Would he leave, or would he stay, and take this moment further into the unknown? And then, he didn't move away. He simply watched, waiting, daring me to react. My pulse thundered as I realized that the simple act of waking up had somehow shifted everything. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the soft morning light wash over me, trying to steady the rapid beat of my heart. The memory of his voice, low and teasing, still lingered, sending a tremor through me. But beneath the thrill, there was always the undercurrent of something unspoken, a tension that had been building between us for months, threaded through stolen glances and fleeting touches. He had always been close, too close at times, yet polite enough to mask the sparks that seemed to fly whenever we were near. There were nights I'd catch him staring at me, a subtle longing in his eyes, and I'd look away, pretending I didn't notice. It was a dangerous game, the kind that teetered on the edge of what we weren't supposed to acknowledge, and yet it drew us together like a quiet, irresistible pull. That morning, as he lingered at the edge of the bed, I remembered how it had started, small gestures that meant nothing alone, but together formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. The way he'd brush past me in the kitchen, hands grazing mine accidentally. The way he remembered tiny details about me that no one else noticed. Moments that whispered a desire neither of us dared to speak out loud. And yet, there were cracks. The cautious distance he maintained sometimes, the subtle hesitations when our hands almost touched, hinted at boundaries neither of us wanted to cross but couldn't quite avoid. I wanted to ask him, to demand clarity, but fear held my tongue. What if acknowledging it all would shatter the fragile equilibrium we'd been maintaining? I opened my eyes and caught him watching me again, his gaze softening, revealing the vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to see. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just the two of us, the quiet rustle of sheets, the steady rhythm of his breath, the way our eyes locked without words. A small smile played at the corners of his lips, teasing yet tender. "You always get lost in your thoughts," he murmured, and I felt a rush of warmth at the intimacy of it. We were both careful, both holding back, but every glance, every subtle movement, spoke louder than words. The room felt suspended in that delicate balance between restraint and desire, a fragile tension that neither of us wanted to break. I wanted to lean closer, to feel the brush of his hand against mine without restraint, but I stayed still, letting the anticipation stretch. There was a promise in the air, unspoken yet palpable, that something deeper was building, a connection neither of us could deny, even if we weren't ready to name it yet. And as he finally took a step closer, the question lingered between us, heavy and magnetic: how far would we let ourselves go before everything changed? The quiet in the room felt heavier now, like it had absorbed all the unspoken words between us. I caught myself noticing the curve of his jaw, the subtle tension in his shoulders, and a pang of something I couldn't quite name, jealousy, maybe, or the ache of wanting him closer but knowing I shouldn't. He moved slightly, brushing a hand against the edge of the sheet that barely covered me. My pulse jumped, a mix of excitement and nervousness, and I realized how dangerously aware I was of every tiny detail: the tilt of his head, the way his eyes lingered, the way his proximity made my own skin feel too sensitive, too alive. "You always have this way of getting me lost," he murmured, voice low, almost teasing. There was a weight in it, a longing I hadn't heard before, that made my stomach flutter. And yet, the hesitation in his gaze, the brief pull of restraint, made the desire between us sharper, more acute. I wanted to lean into him, to let the tension dissolve into something tangible, but a flicker of fear stopped me. This closeness, this charged energy, was a line neither of us should cross, and yet, it pulled us forward anyway. The thrill of the forbidden made every heartbeat louder, every subtle touch heavier with meaning. For a moment, the room felt suspended in time. I could almost feel his longing echoing my own, an invisible thread connecting us, taut and electric. The playful teasing, the charged silences, the small touches that lingered just a second too long, they were dangerous, thrilling, impossible to ignore. And then, as if sensing my hesitation, he leaned a fraction closer, his gaze locked on mine. "You can't pretend you don't feel it," he whispered, a question, a challenge, and a confession all at once. My breath caught. I wanted to answer, to surrender to the tension, but words failed me. The closeness, the unspoken desires, the simmering temptation between us, it all hovered on the brink, daring us to take the next step. I shivered, aware of every heartbeat, every inch of space between us, and knew that what came next could change everything. The afternoon sunlight spilled through the blinds, casting stripes across the room and painting our faces in warm, golden light. We were alone, the quiet hum of the house around us, yet somehow the space between us felt impossibly small. Every movement, every glance, carried weight, a tension that neither of us could ignore. He leaned casually against the doorframe, hands in his pockets, but there was an alertness in the tilt of his head, a readiness that made my chest tighten. I shifted on the bed, the sheet slipping just slightly as I turned to face him, and felt a rush of awareness that left me both exhilarated and nervous. The closeness was unavoidable now. There was no one else, no distractions, just the charged energy simmering between us. "Do you ever think about us?" he asked quietly, almost too casual, and the words hung in the air like a dare. My throat went dry, my pulse quickened, and I felt the pull of temptation I had tried to ignore for so long. I caught his gaze lingering on me, soft yet insistent, and the playful tension between us deepened. Every subtle movement, the brush of his sleeve against his arm, the way he leaned just slightly forward, made the air feel electric. I wanted to close the distance, to reach out, yet there was a delicious hesitation, a teasing restraint that made every second stretch and stretch. A shiver ran through me as he took a small step closer. The proximity made my senses sharper, the faint scent of him, the warmth radiating from his body, the subtle brush of air as he moved. I could feel the unspoken question passing between us: how far would we let this go? I swallowed hard, aware that the moment was teetering on the edge of something irreversible. One step, one word, one look, it could change everything. And just as I thought I might finally give in to the tension, the door creaked slightly behind him. We both froze, eyes snapping toward the sound, hearts hammering, caught between anticipation and the fear of being interrupted. The moment hung, suspended in time, as the question lingered: would we act on the desire that had been simmering for months, or would the interruption pull us back from the brink? The room felt smaller somehow, charged with the tension that had been building for weeks. Every heartbeat thundered in my ears, every breath came a little faster, and I could feel him just an inch away, his presence impossible to ignore. We were so close now that even the air between us seemed to hum. "I can't keep pretending," he said suddenly, voice low but trembling with emotion. My chest tightened, a mix of anticipation and fear, because I sensed the truth about to spill, a revelation that could change everything. "What do you mean?" I asked softly, my fingers tightening on the edge of the sheet. He hesitated, eyes flicking to the floor for a moment, then back to me. I've felt this way for months. I've tried to ignore it, tried to act normal, but I can't anymore. I blinked, caught off guard. The confession hit me like a wave, the admission of a hidden desire that mirrored my own secret feelings. My pulse spiked, and I felt an almost dizzying mix of relief and excitement. I wasn't alone in this anymore, he felt it too. Then, just as I thought the moment might be ours, the phone on the bedside table buzzed sharply. He glanced at it, and a flicker of panic crossed his face. I followed his gaze and froze. A message previewed on the screen revealed something I hadn't expected, an old friend reaching out, someone whose presence hinted at complications he hadn't mentioned. "Wait," he whispered, his hand hovering near mine, torn between reaching for me and checking the message. The room seemed to pulse with uncertainty. The tension shifted, no longer just desire, but the raw vulnerability of secrets revealed and risks exposed. I realized then that this was the turning point. Our attraction had always been simmering beneath the surface, but now it was raw, open, and undeniable. The twist wasn't just the confession, it was the sudden awareness that love and trust were fragile, that what we felt was precious but also risky. I stepped closer, closing the gap without touching, and he met my gaze with equal intensity. Words weren't needed, our shared understanding said it all. Something had shifted irrevocably, the air between us was charged not just with longing, but with honesty, risk, and the promise of something more. The phone buzzed again, a reminder of the world outside, but we didn't move. We just stood there, suspended in that precarious balance, hearts racing, caught between what we wanted and what the world demanded. The next move could change everything, and yet, for the first time, it felt thrilling rather than terrifying. The room was quiet except for the rapid beating of our hearts, the silence stretched taut by the weight of what had just been revealed. I stared at him, trying to process everything, his confession, the unexpected message, the swirl of emotions that had left both of us raw and vulnerable. "I shouldn't have kept anything from you," he admitted, voice low but urgent, like a dam finally breaking. "I thought I could control it, that I could ignore how I felt, but I can't." I swallowed hard, feeling my chest tighten. The truth of it hit me harder than I expected. Months of suppressed feelings, hidden glances, the tension that had always simmered beneath the surface, it was all out in the open now. My emotions collided, relief, longing, frustration, and a thrill I couldn't deny. "You mean, all of this, the teasing, the moments, the closeness, it wasn't just in my head?" I whispered, barely able to meet his gaze. His hand hovered near mine, trembling slightly. "Nothing was in your head. I've felt it too. I didn't know how to admit it until now." For a moment, we just looked at each other, suspended in the intensity of our emotions. The room felt smaller, warmer, as if the space itself recognized the fragile honesty between us. There was vulnerability, yes, but also an undeniable pull that drew us closer. And then, he did something bold, he stepped fully into my space, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. Not touching, not rushing, but the proximity itself was electrifying. The tension we had carried for months condensed into a single, breathtaking moment of clarity. I realized then that we had both made choices that led us here, choices to suppress, to hesitate, to wonder. And now, with the truth laid bare, there was no turning back. The suspense, the fear, the longing, it had all been building toward this emotional reckoning. I let out a shaky breath, feeling the rush of adrenaline and relief. So, what happens now? I asked, heart hammering, voice trembling with anticipation. He smiled, that half-teasing, half-tender smile I knew so well. Now, we figure it out. Together. And even without touching, without a single word more, the room vibrated with the electricity of unspoken promises. We were on the edge of something new, something daring, yet it felt safe because it was real. The conflict had resolved, but the story wasn't over, it had only opened the door to the next chapter. The morning light spilled gently across the room, softening every corner and washing the tension from the night before away. For the first time in weeks, the air felt lighter, as if the weight of unspoken words and hidden longing had been lifted, leaving only clarity and warmth between us. I looked at him, sitting across from me, and saw a tenderness that had always been there but now shone openly. He smiled softly, a quiet reassurance, and I felt a rush of affection that made my chest ache in the best way. No teasing, no hesitation, just honesty, just us. I'm glad we finally said it, I murmured, my fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the sheet. The small touch was enough to send a shiver of comfort and connection through me, and I realized that the tension we'd carried wasn't gone, it had transformed into something beautiful. He leaned forward, a cautious but confident motion, closing the space between us with a presence that felt protective yet intimate. Me too, he replied, voice warm. I don't want to hide anymore, not from you, not from myself. The room seemed to hold its breath as we shared that quiet moment, letting the emotions of weeks, longing, hesitation, fear, and desire, settle into a calm certainty. I realized that the risk, the uncertainty, the near misses and charged silences had all led to this clarity. We were here, together, fully and openly, and it felt like coming home. I laughed softly, the sound mingling with the morning light. I guess all that tension finally had a purpose, I said, teasing gently but with genuine warmth. He chuckled, the sound rich and sincere, and reached for my hand, holding it without a word. It was simple, small, yet profound, the kind of gesture that carried everything we had felt and everything we hoped for. In that single touch, I felt a promise of honesty, connection, and a future built together. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely seen, completely understood, and completely safe to let my heart follow where it had been quietly yearning to go. And as our eyes met, soft smiles playing across our faces, I knew that what we had found wasn't just attraction, it was something lasting, tender, and true. The world outside could wait. In that room, in that quiet morning, everything aligned, and we simply existed, together, unhurried, and wholly present.